you so much for joining us on this beautiful, beautiful Saturday afternoon. I am Tananarive Due. I'm the co-host of the Octavia Tried to Tell Us webinars. Monica, are you there?
I am here. I'm Monica Coleman, and I am
Yes.
also your co-host.
Our best. We're just happy to have this space to enjoy each other's company, to draw inspiration and wisdom from the work of Octavia Butler, and to welcome our two guests today. We have two very exciting guests.
Great. I'm going to introduce our public scholarship technology consultant, Dr. Clayton Coleman. You should be able to see him in just a moment. And he'll get us started and do some introductions, and we'll begin. We're just happy to talk about, again, Octavia Tried to Tell Us, a parable for today's pandemic.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My name's Clay Coleman. I am very excited to have everyone here in the space today. I hope you all feel welcome because I know certainly that we hope that you do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by sharing my screen to get started. So today we have some wonderful guests, as Tananarive Due mentioned, and I want to introduce everyone before we enter into the conversation. All right. So welcome to Octavia Tried to Tell Us, the second in this webinar series. We'll be discussing Parable for Today's Pandemic. Today's session will be hosted by Tananarive Due and Dr. Monica Coleman, who you've met. We'll also have some special guests today, some wonderful guests, Ayana A. Jamieson and Toshi Reagon. This is a webinar that's in partnership with the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Before we get started, I wanted to give some overview of what we're going to be doing today. So our plan for our time together. We're going to start with some introductions, and we're going to follow up by moving into the section of conversation. And then at the end, we'll get towards the questions that you offered in that web form that you all filled out. Now, you also should feel free to tag us or to tweet us at Octavia Tried with the hashtag Octavia Tried. And we'll be looking through Twitter for other questions as well, in addition to the ones that you've submitted in the forum. So to get started, I want to start by introducing Tananarive Due. Now, Tananarive Due is award-winning author who teaches Black horror and award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism in UCLA. She's an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary, Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror, a leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years. Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Image Award, and a British Fantasy Award. And her writing has been included in Best of the Year anthologies. Her books include Ghost Summer Stories, My Soul to Keep, and The Good House. She and her late mother, civil rights activist Patricia Stevens Due, co-authored Freedom in the Family, a mother-daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights. She is married to author Stephen Barnes, with whom she collaborates on screenplays. They live with their son, Jason, and 2 cats. You can find Tananarive Due at Tananarive Due on Twitter. Next, I wanted to introduce Dr. Monica E. Coleman. Dr. Coleman is professor of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware. She's also an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. She works at the intersection of faith, culture, and social justice. She's the author or editor of 6 books and several articles and book chapters that focus on the role of faith in addressing critical social and philosophical issues. Her book, Making a Way Out of No Way, A Womanist Theology, is required reading in colleges and universities around the country. Her memoir, Bipolar Faith, A Black Woman's Journey with Faith and Depression, received the Silver Illumination Award in 2017. Dr. Coleman speaks widely on religion and sexuality, religious pluralism, churches and social media, mental health, and sexual and domestic violence. Next, introducing Ayana A. Jamieson. She is the founder and creative director of Octavia Butler Legacy Network, a global community inspired by and committed to uplifting and highlighting Butler's life, new works, practices, and ways of being in the world, inspired by Butler's legacy. She teaches in the Department of Ethnic and Women's Studies at California State University Polytechnic Pomona. Her work centers around the intersections of critical depth psychology, race, culture, and mythology. As an interdisciplinary scholar, Jamieson's dissertation, Certainty of the Flesh, biomythographical reading of Octavia E. Butler's fictions, explores Butler's biographical origins and the mythic aspects of her literary work. And we also have with us Toshi Reagon. Toshi Reagon, librettist, composer, musical director, is a talented and versatile singer, composer, musician, curator, and producer with a profound ear for sonic Americana, from folk to funk, from blues to rock. Her expansive career has landed her at Carnegie Hall, the Paris Opera House, and Madison Square Garden. Toshi was the recipient of a NIFA Award for Music Composition, co-composed music for 2 Peabody Award-winning films, and received the Black Lily Music and Film Festival Award for Outstanding Performance. Her many collaborators include Liz Wright, Carl Hancock Rooks, Allison Miller, Annie DeFranco, her band Big Lovely, and her mother, Bernice Johnson Reagon. In 2011, Toshi created Word, Rock, and Sword, a festival celebration of women's lives. Toshi is the co-creator of an opera based on Octavia E. Butler's novel, Parable of the Sower. This project received a 2016 NEFA National Theater Project Creation and Touring Grant. And you can reach Toshi at Big Lovely One on Twitter. Last but not least, I want to provide a special thanks to the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Women in the Arts Social Change is a public program initiative highlighting the power of women in the arts as catalysts for change that launched in October 2015. Cultural Capital Program partnerships with leading DC area organizations and connect the museum with new audiences for programs with a cause-driven focus. The Women Arts and Social Change Public Programs Initiative is made possible through leadership gifts from Denise Littlefield Sobel, the Duray Davis Family Fund, and the Susan and Jim Swartz Public Program Fund. Additional funding is provided by the Bernstein Family Foundation, the Ravada Foundation of the Logan family, and Stephanie Sale. So you can also reach the National Museum of Women in the Arts at Women in the Arts on Twitter. Again, please feel free to use the hashtag #OctaviaTried to submit any comments or questions during this webinar. And without further ado, because you came to hear the cool people here, I want to move to the conversation section of this presentation, which everyone will be discussing Parable for Today's Pandemic.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. So I know all of us are facing separate storms throughout this pandemic. So I just wanted to honor that in whatever way we are facing uncertainties, disruptions, in worst case scenarios, losses and illness. So I wanted to acknowledge that and just be full of gratitude that we're sharing this space together. And welcome to our guests. Oh my gosh, I am so excited for this. I don't want to take off with the thing, Monica, but I'm just so excited because this is like a reunion. The last public event I attended was the Parable of the Sower opera presentation at UCLA on March 7th. And that was my last outing in the world before everything fell apart, which is in some ways so fitting, obviously. Even Toshi, we were talking about that when you got there. But also Ayana was there. She and Toshi had a great talk back after the opera before we went to the parking lot, and we're actually living in Parable of the Sower.
And since I somehow left the West Coast where y'all were,
so you would have been there.
I would have been there with bells on in your row, hopefully.
Absolutely. So this is, I'm just profoundly grateful that we can try to recreate some of that space now virtually, and to welcome Toshi. I have been a huge fan of this opera since I saw you perform Unplugged at Spelman College a couple years ago, and nothing would have kept me from seeing the March 7th performance. And so thank you so much for being here.
And one thing that Tananarive and I talked about was how important art is right now. And that's one of the reasons we really wanted to focus on that for today's webinar. You know, how art is our survival strategy, it's our spiritual practice, it's a way we create. And that's what so many of the questions are, in our mind, kind of really focusing around. It's, you know, art in a general sense, and why that's so important even now in a pandemic, right? Right when schools are like, what do we cut? We cut the art programs. We're like, no, you know, art is really what we need.
There's a lot of love for the Parable of the Sower opera. People asking questions about it, its inception, its future. So I think maybe we could just start at the beginning. One of the comments you made during the recent Facebook live stream was that for all the brilliance that is Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, there was one missing component, and that was the folk singer. And enter the folk singer. So if you could talk a little bit about what drew you into this project, why Parable spoke to you, what you wanted to contribute to Octavia's vision.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Parable is such an amazing, and important story. And of course, I definitely noticed there is like a little bit of singing in it, you know. And one of the things that is we put in the opera, and it's so devastating in the book, is when one of the songs that are in the book is we shall not be moved. You know, like a song that's, you know, really old song and really resonated during the Southern Freedom Movement and the Civil Rights Movement. And it's so devastating in the book because, and very important for us in the opera, we put it in there because that's when Lauren is like, no, we are going to be moved. And it's just a matter of when and in how many pieces, you know. And it's like, it kind of breaks your heart. Sometimes when we perform it, people start singing it in the audience with the two women who sing it in the show. And they start singing, we shall not, you know, and then Lauren comes out and just says, no, we are going to be moved. And, you know, and it's not going to be easy. So I really appreciate that one small moment in the book of music. But I definitely was like, you know, I just really was missing that voice. And in particular, not just any kind of music, but the kind of music, and it could be poetry as well, where someone is really taking a look at what's going on and being very topical about it, and really putting a melodic structure that everyone can join into, so that you have company while you're telling the truth. And so, yeah, I definitely was like, we are going to have that be in the show. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew it would.
Fantastic. Just one of the things I know I just mentioned to you via email is that during this pandemic in particular, hearing the live stream on Facebook after the concert really it struck in a different and deeper way, just because the crisis had deepened. In particular, the song Have You Seen My Father? Lauren Olamina, for those of you in the audience who may not know, the teenage protagonist in Parable of the Sower is living in a very fragile, gated and guarded community called Robledo during crisis, and the community falls. Spoiler. Sorry, I'll try not to tell too much. And the novel is really about her gathering up her earthseed. She has created this beautiful religion that helps give people purpose and inspiration, and is determined to survive. And her father disappears fairly early in the story. And when I heard Have You Seen My Father post-COVID, it just brought to mind, first of all, the fragility of our elders, and worrying about them, whether or not they're sick, never mind if they are, because nothing is normal anymore. There are no normal visits to the pharmacy. There are no normal visits to any doctor's office during a pandemic. And also this horrible phenomenon where people are not able to attend funerals to lay loved ones to rest. And I'm sorry if any of you in this group have experienced that. I know some of my students at UCLA have. So the music just grows more and more topical as time goes on. I'm wondering if you feel that sense, and I'll shut up.
I think, my mother wrote, "Has anybody seen my father?" And I'll never forget the day that she wrote it. We were in a recording studio, and a lot of times we're just sitting in a room together, and we have 2 microphones, and sometimes I have my guitar, and she'll have an idea. And when she sang this, it really spoke to, like, not just the personal, like my father, but the way that so many of us have been disappeared in terms of the creation of this country, how we've been separated from each other, how there's just seems to be an intention, I think, on the planet, but I'll speak for the United States. It seems to be an intention to really destroy families, like just Black families, indigenous families, like that. You just break down so viciously infrastructure and support, and you want all the benefits of these people. You want their bodies, and you want their intellectual property, and you want, if they make money, for them to pay in an overall system that's supposed to support everybody. And then you make up this whole thing about, like, small government, but you make the most gigantic and invasive government that's always been the US government, has to be in charge of everything. And part of its mechanism is the destruction of families and a constant weight on the bodies of our people. And when we put that there, I have to give a lot of credit to our director, Eric Ting, because he really saw that as the moment that would really say, it's not just Lauren's father, but it's everybody in that community that has gone. Almost everybody gets killed, and that she knew. And also, like, people had been dying, and things had been going away. And so it's the moment where, she really gets to reach all of us, and everybody in the cast. We're always so affected by that moment. It's very raw, and it's dark, and she's by herself. And it really speaks to that way where you have that moment where you have to decide what to do when everybody else is gone. And for Lauren Alamina, she had already been thinking about what to do with her path. So, everybody else being gone didn't change that direction that she had. So, but that song is it's such an important song. It's super important to be able to say what is happening to you. And I was really grateful to my mom when she wrote that, because it just gives you access to a devastating truth. And when you sing it, it gets to hit other people, and you're not by yourself in it anymore. And it's one of the songs that people love the most in the show.
And it's funny the way you framed it. Somehow I've never seen it that way before. I mean, I've read Parable many times and haven't thought of that as a pivotal moment, right? But as you describe it now, we talk about losing our elders. So many of us are right now, and it's none of even many know. My mom passed away, not related to Corona, but in this season, right? So we didn't have our rituals and our practices that we like to have as people, as religious people, as cultural people, right? What we do when people pass away or pass into a new existence. And I described it as, losing my compass, right? Losing my North Star. Even though I knew in some ways my mother's condition, it was going to happen. And I see now in some ways, I see it in a different way, how in very literal ways, right? Lauren has to become her own North Star. right? She has to become her own compass. We have to become that. And I like how you sing us into that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, each of us comes up into this life, and there is no like anything that tells you like, and welcome to the world, and you are going to be here for this amount of time or that amount of time. And, there's almost like you learn your condition the second, you're here. And, I just remember like what my people told me when I was little, they just were like, you're amazing. You're so beautiful. Like, it's a constant affirmation that has worked my like entire life. Like, if nobody else likes me, I just remember my people. The gift of becoming an elder, the gift of surviving through decades, and if we do it right, we are taking care of our people, is tremendous. It's like the amount of knowledge, like, the way information is now, it's like gone in seconds. I remember we think something, an old record is 5 years old, and now it's like a week old. So information is, you actually need these people so you can know where you are. And, me and my bestie, Jacqueline Woodson, the author, is like my best friend. And we were really thinking about how we feel like we're the last generation that is a bridge between like, our parents' generation and this new one that remembers all of these ways of being, that is not an assumed giving away of what to corporations, giving access to them to your entire lives. And there's a lot of people who think they can't have what they want unless they just automatically click, it's okay. And we also are a generation that understands the trajectory of what that means, right? Like, we understand that we used to actually have money in our hands, and it was cash. And then we could go to a store and we could disappear with it. Lauren disappears with cash. She doesn't disappear with a bank card. She doesn't disappear with a cell phone. She disappears with cash, her brain, maps, a gun, some food. She disappears with these really tangible things. No electricity, like no Airbnb, So I think like, when I think about how prepared Lauren was, or when I think about elders and I think about, all of this transportation, I really think about like, what do we have in our pockets? What do we know? What do we carry with us that actually helps us in situations when predators actually decide to come upon you like they are now? And this pandemic, not just the issue of that people are dying, in waves, but the issue is how much is being done underneath that. So while we are in a state of like, trying to, keep our health and not catch this virus, while we're in a state of taking care of people who have it, while we're in a state of burying people who have died, while we're in a state of trying to share our resources and support each other, like, we have the most predatory government ever that is coming after us so hard. Like, it's not even a joke. They're just they're building the web even more. So we have a government that's like, please die for the economy. And while you're at it, we're going to elect federal judges that will be in power for like decades, because we're not sure if this man is going to win again, but we want to make sure the infrastructure that he and his administration created is intact if he doesn't. So that is like, that is like the kind of, wide, like, I don't know, I can't call it death, but I can call it like, it goes hand in hand with the idea of not caring for people during a crisis where you definitely could have. It's a part of the same plan. It's a part of the same thing. And all of us can't separate, right, our mourning our people from the fact that there is a reason why they died, and it goes hand in hand with this current government. And so our work is even more expansive. It's not just like how we resonate with all of this transportation of people, but it's how we resonate with the fact that it was allowed to happen. And what does that mean for us as we turn to face who these people really are?
Yeah,
like
the worst possible. Yes.
It reminds me of stories like, you know, from the elders in my family when I was a kid. And they just talk about how the government was so predatory and didn't care, and the systems that they had to create. This time reminds me of that.
It reminds me of, I interviewed my grandmother when I was, I think, an undergraduate, and I asked her about when she first arrived in California. And she came in 1950, and I didn't understand what the Green Book was, right, as a 20-year-old, but really she was doing what Lauren was doing. Her girlfriend, who was also a nurse, they left Harlem. My grandmother got her friend had gotten a driver's license the week before they left, and they had to drive through, these two Black women together, drive through this country in 1950 to leave to come to LA. So I was hearing these stories of liberation from an elder's mouth, not understanding the context, right, of what profound things she was telling me. And then I would find it later in literature in grad school, but it was like life. This is not like somebody made something up. She was telling me, you know, you could go here, you could stay there, you couldn't stay there. You had to go where the people told you, but I didn't understand what she was telling me. This is the reality. It was constructed this way on purpose. It was intentional. It's not even that they allowed us to die. It was intentional that they were putting us in danger. It was designed that way, so that these women would be vulnerable as women, but also as Black women, trying to leave their place where they were forced to go to nursing school outside of the communities where they were originated from. So this story that Lauren is telling, it may happen in 2024, but it's a repeat of history that we've had in our ancestors and elders' lived experiences that we may not have access to anymore because they've passed on.
Well, you know, and the way you're describing it reminds me of something we talked about briefly, and I'd love you to say a bit more about it. I think it connects here. And that is, you know, you talked about Octavia Butler as a kind of trauma theorist, right? And that she's offering us a way to manage trauma. Can you say a bit more about that, since that's where so many of us, I mean, have been in the past, but really can feel more acutely now?
Well, my background is in psychology. And so even though I was studying trauma and experiencing trauma myself and able to deal with some of it by reading Octavia, it didn't occur to me until much later on that she's a cultural worker and a cultural theorist. But now in hindsight, she's actually doing the work of having narrative therapy. Like when Toshi talked about, she literally wrote herself into the production because that's Octavia's methodology that she's sniffing out as she and her mother are putting this together. This is what Octavia's doing. She is talking about her literal father is missing. Her mother dies of a stroke and in a coma in the middle of writing these books. So very often, especially in her early literature, she's writing about the alienation and the, we call it dissociation, right? How do we survive in a dissociated state when we're dissociated because we're protecting ourselves to be sane, right? We're clay from Clay's Ark, out in the middle of the desert, right? We're out there in the middle of the desert trying not to be overloaded and have our senses overloaded, right? She's already writing like ways that therapists have teased out, especially therapists of color who are survivors of terror and trauma themselves. That's why I think that ultimately she was identifying the psychology of her work. What do we need to get through this period? And especially she's talking about, what do I need in order to not end my own life because I can't be here. This place is not, you know, it's hostile to me, right? And so this is a very real truth that she's theorizing about psychological concepts without necessarily using the words, but she's using the methods that people have tried and true, and she's doing them from an embodied sense, right? When we talk about body horror, I'm not a person who can watch horror. Monica and I talked about this yesterday. It's not something that I can watch or get into even metaphorically because of my own stuff. Like the trauma and the body stuff is already there, right? So I have to be removed, you know, watching us with the lights on in my office in the middle of the day right before class. So Octavia was exposing herself to the horrors and terror of being alienated from her own body and being abject as a child who was called ugly from a young age, and then eventually thought people were just lying, and they still thought she was ugly and worthless and all of these other things. Is really profound what a person she was and how she felt on the outside. So when Lauren's beginning on the outside and she's there writing in her diary, I mean, the difference between seeing the production of the Apocalypse production that we just saw 7-8 weeks ago, and seeing how it was coming together in Dubai, when Lauren's there writing in her journal, to me, that's Octavia, this 6-foot-tall girl who's 12 years old, like has no other friends and nobody else to relate to. And that's what she's doing in order to have dialogue with herself and have something affirming for her. It's eerie the way that the production pulls these things out of the book that actually pull things out of the archives that folks haven't even seen. So for me, like, it's my whole world is just being cracked open anytime I hear a song or when I'm watching, because you don't know what you know, but your heart knows it. And
Yes.
that's, I think, Octavia's message for us too, I think, in all of her writing. You don't know what assets you have. You don't know who your community is. You don't know who your defenders and your allies are until the stuff hits the road. So be ready, right?
Beautifully put. Absolutely. Be ready. So much of what she was trying to tell us. And yes, it's kind, to me, it reminds me of a kind of a secular spiritual, right? The music from that opera. When my late mother was ill and dying, we all stood around her holding hands and sang freedom songs. You mentioned those, Toshi, and the deep impact. So that's what we knew would feed her, not the gospel or the hymns from church, but her church was activism, right? And the music from the opera reminds me of that so much. It's a deep secular spirituality. I mean, it is about God, and she is creating a religion, but also it just hooks deeply in that same way that those freedom songs do.
I'm going to push back. Whenever I hear people say the word create religion, I feel like she isn't, and she's very specific. She's just saying she observes what's happening around her, and she's just writing it down like she's being a conduit, and the things are coming through her. She's not. Like, Octavia constructed the poems, but when you look at the archive, you see like all of the masses of research she did and how they came distilled in those poems. Those poems are the folk song. People do say earthseed verses and connect with one another. Like, we give our dead to the trees, we give our dead, right? Like, that's the folk music that's in there. And that's the pivot, even in the next book. Like, that's the point at which she remembers what has occurred through those past times. So I don't feel like she created anything as much as she's acknowledging that it's created her. The need to change us created her. I feel like that's what we're called to do.
Well, and to me, you know, bias as a religion scholar, like, that's what religion's supposed to be, right? That's how it's supposed to work. Theology is us looking around and seeing what's there. That's the work a constructive theologian does, and says, this is what will free us, though, right? We're all looking at the same thing, but we're not all interested in freedom. Right? We're all in the same world. We're not all perceiving it through the same lens. And so I think, I mean, maybe she's not creating religion. I would say she's constructing theology. She's giving us a belief system, because she could have looked around and given us something else, right? And so what she, and I'm like, this is what we're all, I mean, I don't think that, just like she would say, I'm not creating religion. I think it's her way of saying, I'm not someone special. We can all do this. And I'm like, yes, we can all do this. We are all theologians.
Beautiful.
The theology is in the mundane as well. Go ahead.
Right. Me?
Oh, go.
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, okay. I think also we chose the music to really span like around 200 years, or 3 centuries. you know, it's not all, you hear spirituals and you hear gospel and you hear blues and you hear funk and you hear rock and you hear, you know, my best hybrid of mushing up contemporary music forms that I don't have a name for. And we use several different kinds of instruments, and we also use digital sounds and things like that. So, you know, in programming to tell the story, it's really important to us that we actually move through time sonically. And so if you, when you see it, the show is, you know, early on, you'll hear spirituals, you'll hear in the conflict between the father and Lauren, there is this idea of holding on and staying together and keeping a line that the father is pushing, and Lauren is like, I'm learning to fly, and you know, everything is like about moving, and as it goes on in time, the music changes with that. And it's funny because a lot of times people really don't want to call us an opera. They want to give us a whole bunch of other names, which is there's really the story of my life musically, where people are like, what kind of music do you do? And I'm like, you're kidding me, right? Like, you've heard this music before. But the part of it is, you know, Alexis P. Gums called it a congregational opera, which I love, because everybody's there, everybody's singing all the time. But it also just took the idea of the genre of music we were doing away, in terms of like having a conversation. If you were like, and they sing, and it's spirituals and gospel, you will be wrong. Like, that's not all it is. It's that we're very particular about it. And to the point of the poems or the parables and the story, absolutely, you know, they're the greatest lyrics ever. You know, they're the greatest. I can sing all of them. Like, they're all not in there, but there's lots of songs we've written that aren't even in the show because they're the most amazing words to sing. You know, Drowning People is like one of my favorite songs in the show. And and it's you know, and when it shows up in the show, it's like, you know, in between a fight and people are, you know, da da da, and then we get to say drowning people sometimes fight their rescuers and use her text. And it is like, we call it a belief system. Like, we're just like so really overwhelmingly pleased. And you know, y'all were like, Octavia tried, and I'm like, Octavia did. You know, it's there. It's not a trying mechanism. It's actually it's actually there. And not only that, but people have used it for so long. It's in the light, like, of the pandemic, that people really want to kind of make it a brand new thing, but it's not brand new. It's been taught for 20 or 30 years since it's come out. It's been taught. There's so many of us actually in a practice around her work and the work of others. And it actually has made such a significant contribution, because so many of us are doing what you all are doing by having this conversation. Like, so many of us know what to do. Like, we're all like, we need to gather. Like, we need to build our people. Like, oh, we can't touch each other. You know, all right, well, we're going to try this digital format. And then simultaneously, I know lots of people are trying to figure out how we will actually gather together physically, and how we will actually create mechanisms to be together that will be safe and won't give each other the virus, because we know that information coming from our government is not going to be around that practice. It's going to be around the practice of you all go to work with no support. And so we're already thinking and cultivating, well, if we're going to go back to work, what do we need to wear? You know, what do we need to have? How do we know? What are the ways that we know we're not exactly right, even though we don't have all of the things that they're saying you should? We have to do that work. And we know we do because Octavia told us, like, in 1993, that this was completely a possibility. And if you could get over your fear, Octavia told us, you can just predict and say, what's next, what's next, what's next. So if you're in a practice of what's next, no matter where you are, you can actually make a line to what you think is going to happen, and you can activate to support it not happening, or activate if it's great, supporting that it does happen. She laid that down, and I really understand the way we say Octavia tried, but it's important to really recognize that you know, the disaster is not us. The disaster is the people actually would never read an Octavia Butler book or read it and would never think of it as a practice, who have ignored, you know, eons and eons of indigenous teachings around the planet, who, you know, beat up and fought the water protectors who were like, you can't put this oil thing here. Like, those are the people who just like wouldn't even, you know, value these systems and these connections. And it's really important to understand how many of us do, how many of us have been in a practice. And I do believe it is why we are all, you know, even in the face of this horror, actually standing and having the capacity to have these conversations, having the capacity to teach our classes, having the capacity to reach out to each other, make sure we're okay. I done called all my friends. I see you looking good on social media. Is that the truth or a lie? You know, like, we have some capacity, we have some change in our pocket, because we actually have been using these systems for a long, long time. So Octavia did. And really, for the other people, it's like, why you ain't been over here with us cultivating? We know why. But it's really important to acknowledge that we have been paying attention, and that we have been in our practices, and that we have been connected, and that we have been using resources from the institutions we might work at, even if we don't love the institutions that we work at. Like, we've been doing it. There's a reason why, you know, I got this work to work on now that there's so many people doing TV shows, because there's a practice with the people who work around Octavia's work. And that, you know, Toshi Reagon could walk into a room and say, hey, I have an idea, I want to try it. And they were like, let's try it. Like, that's about being very, very close to what Octavia's work is, and the level and her intention. And when I meet with her family, like, they're overwhelmingly supportive, because they're like, yes, that's right, that's what she was talking about. So, like, I do love the title of y'all's thing. I'm not saying to change it, but I'm saying, like, we can recognize that, you know, she did her thing. She wasn't in a trying position with these particular books. You know, I think there's a reason why, you know, Parable of the Trickster didn't come out. You know, and I think, you know, and if you look at some of Parable of the Trickster, yeah, I'm like, wow, I really wish she could have finished that one. But I really feel how difficult it might have been to write that story.
Absolutely. On a practical note, Toshi, because time flies by, and we had a lot of questions about the opera itself. When you were at UCLA, you talked about future appearances. I don't know if UCLA was your last one, but what is, for people who have not seen it, who have not heard it, what are their opportunities to interact with this beautiful music, this beautiful presentation? How are you adapting with your struggle and journey post-COVID?
Yeah, no, well, so we got permission from the estate to show our 2015 workshop from NYU Abu Dhabi. And so we can show it for a period of time. It's not going to be, we're not allowed to like just have it be up. So there are several times up into May 22nd where this is going to be shown. The next one will be May 15th, and it will be sponsored by Carolina Performing Arts. So we offered it to all of the people who already presented Parable to show on their own platform. So Carolina Performing Arts, 1 p.m. On May 15th, 1 p.m. Eastern time, will show the workshop from 2015. And it will be shown one time on that day at 1 p.m. Eastern time, wherever you are. You can follow the Parable Opera Instagram, or you can follow Parabolist or Opera page on Facebook, or just my personal page. Follow that, because it's it's all public and I post everything. And then it'll be shown again by CAP UCLA, and the final time it'll be shown will be May 22nd, and it'll be my showing in collaboration with Arts Emerson. I don't have a time yet, but there will be a lot of things going on around that, a lot of conversations. So it's kind of be a day of Octavia E. Butler's Parable of the Sower. And yes, it will be shown again. Several people, several organizations, several communities were lined up to present it, and everybody is adapting to beautifully, I might say, to the current situation. And so making plans of if it will happen at this time, and it might happen at this time, it might happen at this time. But there, as soon as we understand how to do it, and in ways that where we can keep people, you know, well, and support our communities, we're going to do it. We're going to start doing it again with our partners. And I should say that I'll start to release some music from the score. It's hard for us to finish it because we can't be together, but there's some things I wanted to release it all at one time, but I'll just start to release some things that we already have. And yeah, so it'll be around, and we have a Parable Path, and Parable Path is not the show. Parable Path is working on the issues that are in communities that are relative to the book, but you know, that's pretty much everything. Lots of people involved in that, and that's an ongoing mission and project in relationship to the opera.
Ooh, I'm so excited about everything you just said. And I know the viewers are too, so thank you for that. I'm making notes. I'm like, oh, no, wait, I'm supposed to be hosting this thing, and I'm
One thing I missed was the duet between Reverend Olamina and his wife.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I'm sorry, repeat.
Oh, I said one thing I missed in the workshop was that duet between Reverend Olamina and Corey. I Will Not Follow You.
Yeah.
That's like some Luther slash, I don't even know. I mean, that was, woo, up there with Have You Seen My Father for me.
Yeah, that's a powerful moment. And again, I just stole from my mother a lot. Like, so that's a song my mom wrote. I think there's two songs in the show that she wrote like early in her career in the 70s. So There's a New World Coming is one of my mom's shows, and I Won't Crumble. That song is another one of her that's in the show. And looking at the workshop, we were like seeing all the music that's not in the show. Like people were just missing, like, well, why can't we do this? It's interesting. The workshop, we hadn't developed all of the narrative storylines yet, but that is a powerful song. And you actually can go on YouTube and hear my mom singing it, which is quite beautiful.
Ooh, thank you very much.
Okay. Nice tidbit there.
Yeah. I want to say too, when we were talking about Octavia Warned Us and the people who will survive, I'm thinking about in the Xenogenesis trilogy in Dawn, when the Oankali tell her that there's some folks who have been living in a bunker, and the reason why that the humans get treated so poorly is because these protesters, basically people who were hunkered down and had all these supplies, were not acting right. Like, I feel like all of the layers of her reality are on top of each other, and she tried to warn us back then, but nobody cared. It's like, oh, y'all blew up the planet over some BS. Okay, you still didn't see how the planet was being treated and it had to take back over. Okay, here are the parables, because they come, they piggyback right into each other. So if we don't solve these problems, here's another warning for us. If we don't solve these issues,
I like that warning.
Octavia warned us. Like, in my mind, like when I'm having anxiety, the way I calm myself down is be like, Octavia warned us. Octavia warned us. Octavia warned us, so that I could be like, okay, I know what to do. Let me call Moya Bailey or something. Let me go find a Sean Crawley. Let me go connect with my community folks, because this kind of work is the only thing that's sustaining me. I love my family, and I miss my family. I miss folks who have passed on, but this is the work, because when the apocalypse comes, I can't just be me in my little house in my suburbs walking the road. I got to have somewhere to go. My kids got to know who's the safe auntie, right? And literally, Tananarive is like 2 exits down. I could get there in a couple days, right?
Any time.
So, I mean, it's a practical thing, very tangible. Like in her go bag, she's got tampons. And shop in peace is something I missed from the workshop. When I'm hearing in the beginning, shop in peace, that's what I feel like. Folks bringing guns to the Walmart and shooting folks up because they need to have a mask. Like, she warned us that this is how it would be. In terms of even consumerism and capitalism is even under threat by these people in bunkers who want to do whatever they feel like doing. I don't know. I feel like my mind is blown continually over and over again. You can't watch movies the same way because people can't even hold hands or come into the house without washing hands. I'm like, oop, gotta wash their hands. This was filmed before COVID.
And what you're saying makes me think of a question we received a lot, and I'd love to hear, each of you and all of us say, so what's the first thing you from the lessons that Octavia gave us, right? We're saying she did tell us. I think we thought tried because we didn't all get it, right?
Yeah, it's mostly about the receivers, not the message.
Right. So from what she gives us in Parable and some of her other books, what does she tell us, meaning all of us who are listening and watching, what would be the first step? I heard you say, Ayana, you call your Earthseed people, right? But what's a first or second step that we can all do as we're grasping, right, to learn from her and from others about what we might do in this right now?
Yeah.
I think
you want to go, Ayana?
I'm thinking about that. I think we need to sort of, and we are doing it partially right now. I'm going to cheat and go with that answer, because I think we sort of need to re-examine what isolation means. Isolation can mean that you are literally by yourself, as I know some of you are, which would be my stepdaughter is that way. That would be so difficult for me. Or you're isolated with a family, which has its own challenges sometimes. But in this moment, when, as Toshi pointed out earlier, we are so separate from each other, if we wanted to go protest together right now, it would be dangerous to go hold a sign somewhere, no matter how egregious. Daily, we see more reasons to protest. So what does isolation mean? Sort of rethinking that idea of isolation, and again, moving toward that community building that Octavia writes about, not just in Parable, but in so many of her works, are about gathering family around you, fledgling, with the symbiosis, and Dawn, which is creating a colony. So that's what I'm sort of taking from it, reimagining isolation and finding bridges and ways to have communal spaces even during a pandemic, which is what we're doing.
Well,
yeah, I think the first thing that we did in my family was assess where we were. So my family is spread out around 2 or 3, 4 places in Brooklyn, and so it was really finding out like where we were and what we had, and then I go to the most extreme place, which is like, what if we have to leave? And what would that look like, and how, and what can we manage to take and what we can't. So I bought all of the things that could go in. We have a grab, pack, and go bag, but actually brought more things. I brought all the things that I thought would for this particular thing should be in bags. And I have to say, I got laughed at by some of my family because I got like, I got like the flat wind up flashlights with a radio, with a charger, with a this. I got I got all of the things. Like, well, what if we can't be in a house? Like, what is going to happen? What if we're not in control? What if we can be in a house but we can't have electricity? What if we can be in a house and the water doesn't work? I bought the gigantic water holder containers that I manage, and I dealt with food. I did like internal first, and then I went out, like, who else could I support? What resources? Who do I kind of pay regularly who I know is not going to be able to work. And then I started to see financially how I could be making regular payments to sustain, people who I have partnerships with. Who did I need to support, and what did it mean to have transportation? I just went from there. And then of course, like lots of gathering online, but I really did make a difference between like, what is a digital relationship because of, the access to this, which doesn't belong to us and which we're not in charge of. And I just thought about like kind of everything that the majority of the ways that we talk to each other, we reach out, that we pay for things, we're not in charge of. It's all electronic. The switch, it can be turned on and off at will. So as diabolical as our government is, I put into place systems where, like, if that happened, I would still be able to reach people. I would still be able to find some of my people. And then I played my favorite game to play, which is This Is My Tribe. And it kind of in the show starts, I'm like, this is my tribe. Like we are now together, and this is the people I roll with, and that's a great game to play because, especially if you're shut in, you really can get a chance to know that, like, if something happens and you have to get out there and you're on your own, like, who's around you. And you can get to see, I can see the behaviors in my building over this. And, for the most part, there's been super generous. Strangers are reaching out, offering to help the elders in the building. Somebody died. There was this beautiful, something in the elevator. But the bottom line is, I think about sustainability as like how well we can take care of each other, how well we can keep people from falling apart. That, like, the collaboration between a government that's predatory and trying to violate you and break systems with people who don't have enough, with people who need lots of support, is the world that, the Olaminas kind of get squeezed in between. So that's what I think should be done first. I think you assess yourself, learn where you are, learn multiple systems of communication, not just the phone. If you don't have maps around where you live, buy some maps. If you had to walk out of your house, or your kids had to walk out of the house, learn the people around you, make some plans. We bought some devices that we can communicate without like a cell phone, and they work a little bit, and they're enough for a little bit of transportation. So think about also, like, do you have a way of getting news that isn't like on your computer and your phone? So do you have a transistor radio in your house? Just think about all those things. In 2024, Lauren was using a radio to know what was going on around her as she was in unknown space. And not that I want any of us to be in unknown space, but people are in unknown space all the time for different reasons that we don't control. And it doesn't always have to be a pandemic or the apocalypse. It can just be that something happened on your block with a water thing, and you got to get off and you have to run out of the house with whatever you can grab. And if you don't have a grab, pack, and go bag, what will you carry out that house? So that's where my brain is.
Beautiful. My mother, who was a child of the civil rights era and always had that mindset, the government is listening to my calls. It could all fall apart at any moment. She sent all of us those wind-up radios, and you're reminding me, I need to make sure I know where it is.
Well, it's my extended family live close enough where I grew up where they can all shelter in place together. So people are down one street from one another, and I call to make sure, is mom covered? Does she have the things she needs? She's at the highest risk. But I think, to the point where assess yourself, part of the work of Octavia Butler Legacy Network is always this. We're always far apart from one another. We're always in isolation. People come here for a little bit to do something and then they leave, but the work continues, right? And I love that that's Toshi's methodology. But in this particular instance, my heart aches for the folks who are already on the margins, who must work, who already were at risk, the children that are in cages, the children who are separated from their parents over some BS, because that could have been any of us, right? And so those are the folks who I think about, like, what can I do? So I love to just uplift the work that people are doing to, like, there's someone who's having memorial services online for people, and you could call somewhere and have a service done for your loved one in whatever tradition, multi-faith tradition or secularly, or the folks who are already on the margins, like seniors. There's an organization that has dropped off things at my mother's house, right? I will do whatever I can to raise money to support the work they're doing, because those are folks who are marginalized. So I think just being aware of folks who, what is their last wish if they pass away, who are not your blood kin, but are who your chosen kin. I'm like, okay, my children request a call from you before you decide that you're going to the hospital and you don't want to be intubated. Like, those very hard conversations about, are you willing, if you're willing to die or put your life at risk, what can I do to mitigate, like, how can I be of service to that? And that's what I'm always that way with my blood kin, right? But the people who are in my chosen family, right? How do I respect their wishes for what these times are? Because people have been living in the end of times. Some of us have had our lights shut off and our water shut off and not had any money. Some of us have had our last loaf of bread. And that's one of the things Octavia teaches us, is she was in that spot. She knows what it's like to already be so poor that it traumatizes you before anybody calls you ugly. Literally, oh, this is how much a loaf of bread costs, right? So she's calling us to the reality of some people's reality, that the apocalypse is already here for our Indigenous folks and First Nations people and single parents who can't even grocery shop without being, ridiculed. So there's lots going on. I think I feel like my hyper empathy like kicks in at these moments, and I have to calm myself down. So I don't just run out and try to do all the things for all the people, because that's not what Olamina did. She was like, girl, calm down, Joanna. Let me give you this book, right? And prepare yourself. So I just try to keep living that and deal with my own trauma so that I'm not incapacitated by it, I feel like.
Beautiful.
I think one of the things I do, which I hope will lead to one of the questions we got, is I turn to scriptures with a very open understanding of what scripture is, right? Those written and oral texts that point us toward that which is holy, right? So parable definitely fits into that. Earthseed fits into that, as well as the ones we might think of being associated with large formal religions, right? Like Bible or Odu or Torah. So, I find myself turning to Earthseed and because I find it comforting, and just its lyrical portrayal and presentation of things that I deeply believe. One person asked, or a couple people asked, what's our favorite Earthseed line or Earthseed verse? So I thought that would be a fun question.
It's a very difficult question.
I know, right? I was like, there's just one. Or one of your favorites.
Yeah, because the only lasting truth is change is definitely my favorite, but I'm not going to use that one because there are so many that are so beautiful that I wrote down, and now I'm having trouble finding them. I think a tree cannot grow in its parent's shadow. I'm going to throw that in. We honor those who have come before, absorb the lessons of those who have come before, but we are meeting a new world every day. And as a mother, and I think all of us who are parents understand that you can give your children everything and they will be who they will be. And you just sort of have to sit and marvel that you even had an association with this person who is his or her own person. So having the courage to grow beyond our parents' day and our parents' lessons while also claiming and honoring them, but growing outside of that shadow is our challenge every day.
I guess I picked one, which again is so hard. I would say, why is the universe to shape God? Why is God to shape the universe? I think because it answers some of those big questions we have, and yet it doesn't answer it, right? It answers and doesn't answer in the same. It doesn't give you that pinpoint, like what's the 10 steps or the 5 steps to get it all kind of answer. But it does answer it, and it kind of reminds us of the symbiotic relationship that we have with God, right? And it's not just God shaping us, but we affect who God is, and I love that.
I found it just in time. Your teachers are all around you. All that you perceive, all that you experience, all that is given to you or taken from you, all that you love or hate, need or fear will teach you if you will learn. God is your first and your last teacher. God is your harshest teacher, subtle, demanding, learn or die. What do I have to learn? What can I learn from myself? How can I time travel back to my, I know something now that I didn't know before. Your teachers are all around you. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I go with, it's not any favorites, but the one I just feel like I'm in use of, embrace diversity. And, embrace diversity or be robbed, be ruled, be all the
Yes.
terrible things or be destroyed. And I think even for us in our communities, like when I say community, I think about Black people, I think about Indigenous people, I think about all people who are working together to be in alignment, more in alignment with each other, but more in alignment with the earth. And there's some really big and amazing communities, and we still within those practices have a lot of biases, and all of the great struggles had like the people, or I should say all of the great struggles that became victorious had the people that they would not let be in the front line. This is like the civil rights movement. It's not like civil rights for gay people or queer people. It's not when the women's movement was not also like, well, we don't necessarily want all these lesbians out here talking like, and we can look in a lot of our communities, we still have not embraced, trans people or gender, the non-binary people. We still have issues with that. I think as soon as the government is saying, certain kinds of people can't use a bathroom, that should be familiar to everybody that that's a tactic that's used against bodies. And we just need to stop worrying about what the bodies are and just say, no, that can't happen. So embrace diversity, even if we're heading in the same direction. We need to try to be as inclusive as possible and aware as possible, or we will be the continuation of the dynamics we don't like.
Fantastic.
Which is,
well, we're
go ahead.
You go, Monica.
I said, ending with Earthseed and things we like and how it speaks to us right now and how important it is a great way for us to wrap up where we've been. Just thank you greatly. Don't go yet, but thank you greatly to Toshi Reagon and Ayana Jamieson. We love how you've decided to join us and talk with us about the way that Butler and Parable shape the work you do and the work that you give to all of us. We're going to ask Clayton to give us our kind of closeout here. Cool.
Sure. So thank you. I want to echo Dr. Coleman's round of thanks. This has been so wonderful. And just looking through the Twitter comments and looking at the way that it's touching and affecting and reaching people, it's a wonderful thing. I also wanted to give people the opportunity to talk about the work that they're doing now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make some space for all of our wonderful participants to talk about the work that they're doing. So I'm going to start with Tananarive Due.
Oh, okay. Well.
You have the slide up, right? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I do, as it's been pointed out, teach at UCLA, but I also have an online version of my Afrofuturism course, which includes Octavia Butler, but is not solely contained within her work at www.afrofuturismwebinar.com. It's a download course already in the can, so you take it at your own pace.
Thank you so much. And next, Dr. Coleman.
Well, as a theologian, I really love and have spent years studying and teaching about process theology, which is a theology based on change as its core concept, change in the world and a changing God. So I'm sharing some of those ideas and what we do in that concept in my course, processtheology101.com. and we launch in mid-June. So you can find more information there.
Fantastic. So I want to open up the space for Toshi.
Thank you. Well, as I said, online will be showing up until May 22nd, our 2015 workshop. And then I'm being Toshi Reagon, the singer, and doing a bunch of things online. You could just really follow me on Facebook or Instagram, and also the 2 websites that are up there. And we'll get the information out. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Ayana.
Yes, so you can find our collaborations and past educational materials. I've had several people contact me asking, can you speak to my class? Can you point me in the direction of resources? And so Moya and I and the other members of our network curate lots of information, workshops, lesson plans, and things at Octavia Butler Legacy or OEB Legacy on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, OEB.Legacy on Instagram, and look out for our Octavia Warned Us stuff. Also, we celebrate her birthday every year, so you'll be able to do that right along with us.
Oh, can I mention one more thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So me and Adrienne Marie Brown are going to be debuting a podcast where we're going through all the chapters in Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, and encouraging folks to read the book with us or already have read it and join the discussion. And thank you, Ayana, because it will debut on Octavia's birthday.
That sounds amazing.
So dope.
Oh, wow.
Go there. Let me know how I can support.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ooh. Speaking of support, I want to turn it over to Dr. Coleman to talk about this, but this is definitely a free webinar, but it's definitely welcome for support.
People asked us, can I contribute?
That's
so
right.
Far be it from us to deny you the opportunity if you feel so moved. So we have several ways to do it. Webinardonate.com takes you to a PayPal page, or if you need to use Venmo or Cash App, that's how you do it.
And really, this is our gift to whomever is interested and excited about these same topics. But people ask, so we said, well, let's here's how you can, and it does help support making this happen.
Absolutely. And you gave us your email addresses. We will not abuse those, but you will be hearing from us with a survey asking you what kinds of topics you'd like us to talk about in future webinars. This will be a continuing series, and we definitely appreciate your input. So look out for that email.
Speaking of which, our next series, can you tell us about it, Tananarive?
Oh, right. Next Saturday, this beautiful artwork you see is actually the cover of the new Parable of the Sower graphic novel. The artist is John Jennings. The writer was Damian Duffy. I was actually a consultant on this. I got to see early sketches and help shape it just a little bit, but they were all over it. And so those two will be joining us next Saturday, along with my husband, Stephen Barnes, also an Afrofuturist, and who knew Octavia for at least 20 years. And so he can give us some personal insights about Octavia as an artist, as we continue to discuss the power of art to create healing, both for the artist and for those of us who benefit from the work of the artist.
You can go ahead and register for that, again, at bit.ly, Octavia Tried 3. So if you want to jump on that, it is available.
And thank you all so much again for being here. What a beautiful, beautiful gathering.
Until next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining.
Just an honor, really. I'm so full right now. Everyone, enjoy Mother's Day for those mothers or people who have acted as mothers or who are remembering their mothers. Happy Mother's Day tomorrow to all of us. And hopefully we'll see all of you next week.
We'll look to see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Goodbye.
right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Peace.